I am now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees. I propose to 1. Remove 7 tariff rates. This is over and above the 7 tariff rates removed in 23-24 budget. The revised estimate of the fiscal deficit is 4.8% of the GDP.
ये बजट एक फोर्स मल्टीप्लायर है। ये बजट सेविंग्स को बढ़ाएगा, इन्वेस्टमेंट को बढ़ाएगा, कंजम्पशन को बढ़ाएगा और ग्रोथ को भी तेजी से बढ़ाएगा।
ये भारत सरकार का बजट है कि बिहार सरकार का बजट है? आपने बिहार के अलावा किसी और प्रदेश का नाम सुना वित्त मंत्री जी के पूरे बजट भाषण में?
The infrastructure is not going for the rest of the country. It's only going towards Bihar because we all know that this year is the Bihar election. So basically, for since and Maharashtra has been ignored, and Tamil Nadu, there's not a single word for Tamil Nadu or for any other southern states.
Hello and welcome to our budget special. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has tried to give consumption a boost by putting money in the hands of the common man. The government will forego 1 lakh crore rupees in direct taxes in this year. The government's rationale is that the money is going to go into the hands of the people, and this will make its way into the economy. Apart from a tax sweetener for the middle class, firmness on fiscal consolidation, continuity on capex were the other key themes dominating the budget. Also, no news is good news for the markets as status quo is maintained on capital gains tax as was expected.
This is reflective of our government's trust on the middle class taxpayers. I am now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees.
There is nothing to cheer about the fact that the government has improved the fiscal deficit from the BE of 4.9% to the revised estimate of 4.8%. It was achieved at a huge cost to the economy. Those who did not believe us when we said that the economy is slowing down will, I hope, believe us now. Those who did not believe us that the capacity of the government to plan and implement schemes has diminished will, I hope, believe us now.
We're now joined by Syed Zafar Islam, national spokesperson of the BJP, Sasmit Patra, Rajya Sabha MP from the Biju Janata Dal, also with us. Let me go across to Mr. Patra first of the Biju Janata Dal. Mr. Patra, how do you see this budget? The focus was on continuity, on improving the livelihoods of the middle class, putting more consumption power in their hands. How do you see the budget overall? Yes, the opposition has complained that this was a very Bihar-centric budget, but overall, do you feel that the government has been right in boosting consumption and putting money in the hands of the middle class? Do you think that will happen with this budget?
You see, this is a case of a missed opportunity. And why I say it's a case of missed opportunity is primarily because of two reasons. One, when you say that for the middle class, you are able to provide some kind of a benefit through such rebates, the middle class, essentially those who are getting about up to the threshold of 12 lakhs, would effectively be benefiting of about 60,000 per annum. Let's say that's the amount, which averages out to about 5,000 per month. If we were to look at the consumer inflation that is happening right now, the food inflation that is happening right now, there are no specific indications in this budget that specifies that inflation is going to be curtailed. So what you are essentially doing is the money that you are saying is going to stay in the hands of people, which will lead to a consumption demand, is actually going to be, in a way, get diluted within the framework of inflation itself. That's the first piece. The second, many a times we believe that income tax being provided a rebate is actually going to help and create and boost consumption and demand. It's not going to happen that way. If you really wanted to do that, you'd have actually increased capacity and increased outlay for Manrega. Now, Manrega is the flagship program for the country as far as livelihood support is concerned at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, if you were to look at the outlay for Manrega, there's absolutely status quo. On one hand, you have got high inflation. Second, there is no scope or any support for reduction of fuel prices. There is no intervention being made for LPG prices. What essentially you are saying is going to go towards the consumption demand will essentially end up just being traded off against the inflation.
Okay. Mr. Patra, thank you for those remarks and your concern around how this budget may actually end up fueling inflation. Let me also get in Milind Deora, the Shiv Sena MP, who's joining us right now. We'll also go across to Mr. Zafar Islam in just a bit. But Mr. Deora, the complaint that is coming in today from the opposition is that what happened regarding stagnant real wages? The government has been speaking about how the private sector needs to pay higher wages, how there has been a demand from the industry to simplify the GST structure, and there could have been a statement of intent in the budget that they are committed to rate rationalization. What about increasing private capex or giving certain boosts in the budget which increase the flow of private capex? What about long-term growth? How do you think the budget really figures on these fronts?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me, and my good evening and namaskar to both my friends on this panel. Both Dr. Patra and Zafar are my very good friends. Firstly, everyone has some expectation of the other from the union budget, and everyone expects the finance minister of the day to address each and every issue. I think, Parikshit, keeping in mind the global challenges that exist today, please try to understand that globally, if you look at the situation, one is there is a move towards greater robotics, artificial intelligence. There is a potential threat to jobs. Globally, you are seeing governments that want to impose tariffs and potentially initiate trade wars with many countries. In the United States, for instance, they've already imposed hefty tariffs on Mexico and Canada. China is probably next. Who knows what will happen in the months and years ahead with India? In that scenario, keeping in mind that there's global uncertainty, keeping in mind that there are severe political, technological disruptions underway, I think it's important that the government of India protects Indian industry, protects Indian job seekers from these disruptive challenges, and not just protects them, but makes Indian industry and especially MSMEs export ready and globally competitive. And in that sense, I give full marks to the finance minister and to the government for undertaking, in my opinion, a series of measures that in the last year in Parliament, I have raised several times that, in my opinion, are strategic endeavors that the government must aspire towards. One, for instance, increasing credit to MSMEs. They are the backbone of our economy. Today, between 1/3 to 50% of manufacturing jobs are created by the MSME sector. Almost between 1/3 and 50% of our exports come from the MSME sector. Okay. Bringing them technology, bringing them access to affordable credit is absolutely critical and essential to make them export ready and be able to compete in a world where globalization is under threat and where tariffs are likely to be imposed, and there's likely to be some degree of trade disputes between India and many other countries that we export to or that we import from. I think a second critical area. But Mr.
Deora, do you also believe that when it comes to the economic outlook in the country, the global environment is uncertain? In such an environment, how do we expect the private sector to deploy more capex? How can we export more? Yes, we have this intention of being bigger players in the global value chain. But did you find that outlook missing?
You know the statistics. It's always bandied about on your channel. The fact that in the last 2.5 years, the amount of capex from the government that has gone into infrastructure which in my opinion is positive government spending. It's spending that leads to a result. It's spending that creates assets. It's spending that creates jobs. Despite doing that, maintaining the FRBM targets, not an easy task, mind you, in any part of the world. So there is a humongous capex play underway right now by the government of India, which naturally kickstarts and has already kickstarted, but naturally strengthens the investment cycle, whether it's domestic investment, whether it's foreign investment, whether it's private investment, whether it's public investment. But as I was saying, few other areas that I think are very, very critical. One is a big growth engine in our country are our cities. Creating a 1 lakh crore fund to essentially incentivize state governments to undertake urban reforms is absolutely essential to boost our growth. A large part of our energy mix is, while it's growing in the area of green and renewable energies, nuclear still accounts for a very small part of our energy mix. Globally, every country in the world, I'm not talking about France, where almost 2/3 of the energy comes from nuclear. If you look at America, if you look at a country like Germany, which a few years ago shut down its nuclear plants, if you look at China, every single country, to cater to the AI boom, is essentially reinvesting in nuclear fission technology and nuclear generation. The Indo-US nuclear deal, which happened many years ago, now is the time to exploit that and to ensure that we have the ability to encourage private foreign investment in nuclear energy. And that, I think, is a huge reform which the finance minister has announced, which in my opinion in the next year will be a critical area of attracting investment and generating clean.
And we've seen some changes, regulatory changes in the US also, which will encourage greater cooperation between India and US in civil nuclear energy.
For your channel, and for your viewers, which I think is very, very critical. And this is something I hear all the time as someone who lives in Mumbai and has represented Mumbai for a long time. If you ask a businessman and entrepreneur, whether they are startups, whether they are micro enterprises, whether they are MSMEs, whether they are large corporates, one thing is common across all. There's a famous saying that no matter who you vote for, the government always gets in. The intent of the finance minister to reduce unnecessary regulation, to relook at and review regulation that is curtailing businesses, to essentially reduce compliance burdens on people, to move from a system where certain agencies could potentially harass businessmen to where they become partners and stakeholders in the country's progress. In my opinion, just that statement from a finance minister, I can assure you, counts for a lot. It sends a very strong message to the bureaucracy.
All right.
So I'm excited about
yes, that was an important message. And the CA had also said that deregulation and get out of the way are important messages in the government's scheme of thinking. Let me now go across to Mr. Zafar Islam. Mr. Zafar Islam, thank you very much for joining us. Manish Tiwari said some time back, ye Kendra ka budget tha ya Bihar ka budget tha? How would you explain the bonanza, the budget bonanza for the state of Bihar in the budget?
Well, you do a back testing and you'll realize all the opposition leaders have always criticized the budget. It is no different today. You just do a back testing from 2014 onwards. Every year, no matter how good budget is being presented, the world has acknowledged that it's a good budget. But for the opposition parties, it is always a bad budget. They will find some problem over the other, some issues over the other. So in a way, it's perfectly fine with us. So we are not overly concerned about their reaction, because we know for sure that they also appreciate the kind of decision which has been taken in this budget, the kind of policy measures which has been taken in this budget. It is another landmark steps towards the Viksit Bharat. The aspiration the Honorable Prime Minister has to have a Viksit Bharat by 2000, to make India Viksit Bharat by 2047. What it takes to become a developed nation, it has to be the basic objective that it has to be a poverty-free nation. The education should be accessible to everyone, the quality education. The disposable income should be for everyone, then have the per capita income in line with the other developed nation, so on and so forth. And if you analyze this budget, forget about this for a moment. I'm not even talking about the bonanza which has been given to the middle class in terms of the relief and tax relief. But what is more important, that the basic objective of the budget encompasses all the aspiration which the Honorable Prime Minister has for India. First, they were very clear that there has to be some policy reforms. So they have undertaken reforms for spurring growth in tax, as far as tax reforms, financial sector reforms, as Milind was talking about, the statutory reforms, and many others, the power sector, energy sector reforms, and urban development reforms. These reforms will definitely boost the growth. And besides that, the disposable income, which now the common man on the street will have, and all the middle class and the service class people, the salaried class people will have the additional income in their hand, will definitely spur growth. There will be spur boost consumption. Consumption will lead to more private investment, and more private investment will lead to more growth to more jobs will be created. So in a way, if you see that it's a very balanced budget which has been presented. I mean, there are many policy decisions which has been taken, which is great and good for the country, but which has not been acknowledged by any of the opposition leaders, because I know for them this only objective is to how to criticize. Let me tell you one thing, that if you just see the July budget, or for that matter, February 1st budget, we could have easily announced this relief which we have given, but we never wanted to make budget as an election budget. That's why we never announced, make this kind of announcement. It was a plain budget with no stimulus in February, but this time we definitely considered everything after the election, after having won Maharashtra and after
we're completely running out of time, Mr. Zafar Islam. We're completely running out of time, but I'd like to thank Mr. Patra and you